The beer was cold, a shocking cascade of amber liquid and foam that plastered strands of dark hair to her forehead and cheeks. First Lieutenant Anya Thorne did not flinch. She sat perfectly still at the small table in the corner of the crowded mess hall at MCOS Miramar, her fork halfway to her mouth, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the man standing over her. The roar of off-duty laughter and conversation had died to a stunned, vicarious hush. Captain Marcus Cole held the empty pitcher, his knuckles white, a triumphant sneer twisting his lips. "This is what I think of your standards, Lieutenant," he announced, his voice loud enough to carry to every corner. "This is what I think of the Corps letting in desk jockeys who've never seen a real firefight." "You are a disgrace to that uniform." Thorne said nothing. The beer dripped from her chin onto the collar of her freshly pressed Marpat Utilities. She could have broken his wrist in 3 places before the first drop hit her uniform. Her body knew the geometry of the movement, the precise application of force needed to snap bone. But she didn't. What would you do in her position? Where are you watching from? Comment your location below. If you believe true strength is measured by control, not aggression, hit subscribe. If you want to see what happens when a wolf is mistaken for a sheep, you need to see this through. 2 weeks earlier, Thorne's arrival at VMA 214 had been met with a collective, unspoken shrug. She was assigned as the squadron's new logistics officer, a seemingly thankless job of managing supply chains for the F-35B Lightning IIs that screamed overhead. She was quiet, her posture erect but somehow unassuming, as if she were trying to take up less space. Captain Cole, the squadron's cocksure operations officer, had sized her up in under a minute. Small stature, no swagger, a file pusher from Quantico sent to fill a quota. He made it his personal mission to expose her inadequacy. He'd mock her meticulous, almost reverently slow checks of munitions manifests. He'd assigned her the worst duties, tasks far below her rank, watching for a flicker of protest that never came. The final proof, in his mind, came during a combat readiness drill. A simulated IED blast, a deafening bang and flash of light, had left her frozen for 17 seconds. A lifetime in combat. Cole had played the recording for his clique of junior officers, pointing with a smug finger. See? No instinct. All procedure, no warrior. He never saw the ghost that had flashed behind her eyes, the scent of burning sand and ozone that wasn't there. He only saw the pause, the fatal hesitation, and judged it to be weakness. From his second-floor office overlooking the flight line, Colonel Maddox watched her. He saw things Cole, in his blustering arrogance, could not. He saw the way Thorne never sat with her back to a door. He saw the impossible economy of her movement, no wasted steps, no superfluous gestures. He saw the way her eyes didn't just look, they scanned, cataloging threats and exits with a fluid, constant vigilance that was as natural to her as breathing. It was the gaze of a predator trying to pretend it was prey. Maddox picked up his secure phone and made a call to a number in Virginia, a number that didn't officially exist. "She's here," he said into the receiver. "And they're testing her." On the ground, another set of eyes watched. Gunnery Sergeant Keene, a man with 3 decades of service etched into his face, saw it too. He noticed the faint, silvery line of a scar that traced her jaw, visible only when the harsh hangar lights hit it just right. He saw the way she field-stripped an M4 rifle during a mandatory qualification, her hands moving with a fluid, terrifying speed that was entirely disconnected from the placid look on her face. She reassembled it in near darkness by touch alone, her time beating every recon Marine on the base. He said nothing to anyone, but he started positioning his own junior Marines to subtly run interference for her, to ensure her paperwork was never lost, to make sure her supply requests were always fulfilled first. He was a silent, institutional antibody, recognizing a foreign but valuable presence and protecting it without orders. The high-pitched, soul-shaking whine of an F-35BS Pratt & Whitney engine spooling up for a maintenance check was all it took. For Thorne, the sound was a physical key, unlocking a door in her mind she fought daily to keep bolted shut. The concrete of the Miramar flight line dissolved into the cracked, sun-baked earth of Helmand province. The smell of jet fuel became the coppery tang of blood and the acrid smoke of a burning technical. She was no longer a logistics officer. She was on her knees, cradling the head of a young Marine, PFC Davis, whose body had been savaged by shrapnel. His eyes, wide with shock and a terrifying innocence, were locked on hers. "Tell my mom I wasn't scared, ma'am," he'd whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. A lie. They were all scared. The roar of the approaching medevac chopper had become the roar of the secondary IED, the one that had taken 2 more of her team. The engine whine peaked, and Thorne dug the nails of her right hand into her own wrist, the sharp sting of pain a tether to the here and now. She was at Miramar. Davis was gone. The promise she made to him, a promise to make sure no more soldiers died under leaders who couldn't tell the difference between courage and bravado, was the only thing keeping her sane. This was the ghost Cole had seen in the simulation, not fear, but memory. Cole, blind to the war raging behind her calm facade, saw her quiet endurance as an invitation. His condescension curdled into outright harassment. He'd publicly countermand her orders to junior enlisted personnel, forcing her to either back down or create a scene. She always chose the former, her silence fueling his sense of superiority. He saw it as proof she lacked the command presence to lead Marines. One afternoon, he cornered her between 2 massive shelving units in the supply depot, the air thick with the smell of canvas and grease. He leaned in close, using his larger frame to intimidate, his voice a low, contemptuous hiss. "You don't get it, do you, Lieutenant? This is a man's world. A warrior's world. You're a liability. Every time I look at you, I see a weak link. Go back to your spreadsheets before you get someone killed." Thorne didn't back away. She didn't even blink. She simply looked at a point just past his shoulder, her gaze so profoundly empty, so devoid of reaction, that for a split second, a primal unease slithered up Cole's spine. It felt like he was talking to a statue. Then his ego reasserted itself. She wasn't strong, she was broken. And he would be the one to finally shatter her. Which brought them here, to the mess hall, with Thorne drenched in beer and Cole basking in the silent, captive attention of 100 Marines. He dropped the pitcher onto her tray with a clatter. "Maybe that'll wake you up," he sneered, turning to leave, expecting a round of supportive laughter. But the laughter never came. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer just stunned, it was heavy, deferential. Gunnery Sergeant Keane was on his feet, his chair pushed back with a scrape. His face was a thundercloud. But before he could take a step, he saw Colonel Maddox standing just inside the main doorway, his expression unreadable, a nearly imperceptible shake of his head stopping the gunny cold. The command was clear: stand down. Wait. Then, the main doors swung open again, admitting 2 men who did not belong. They were in their late 50s, dressed in civilian button-downs and worn jeans. One walked with a slight, rolling limp. They carried themselves with an aura of coiled stillness, their eyes sweeping the room not with curiosity, but with a professional, ingrained assessment of every person in it. They were with Maddox. Their gaze landed on the scene, the arrogant captain, the silent room, and the soaked lieutenant. They walked forward, their footsteps unnervingly quiet, parting the sea of Marines. Cole, confused by this new development, stood his ground. He didn't recognize them, but he recognized the type. Contractors, probably. Old-timers. One of the men, a man named Whitaker whose file was a ghost in the Pentagon system, stopped a few feet away. He ignored Cole completely. His eyes, the color of faded sea ice, were locked on Thorne. His voice was a low rasp, but it cut through the mess hall like a surgeon's scalpel. "Wraith," he said, the name dropping into the silence like a stone into a deep well. "You good?" That one word, that name, was a key. It wasn't a question, it was an activation code. Something inside Anya Thorne shifted. The placid mask dissolved. Her shoulders squared, not in defiance, but in alignment. The vacant look in her eyes was replaced by a focus so intense it was almost a physical force. She didn't speak. Slowly, with a deliberation that drew every eye in the room, she reached down and began to roll up the wet sleeve of her left utility blouse. One fold, then another. There, on the pale skin of her forearm, was a tattoo. It wasn't the bold, declarative eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marines. It was a stark, minimalist black trident. But it was wrong. It was subtly different from the standard Navy SEAL trident, intertwined with 5 thin, vertical hash marks tattooed just below it. It was a sigil few would ever see, and fewer still would understand. It was the mark of a Tier 1 JSOC operator, from a unit whose existence was officially denied. The 5 hash marks were not for kills. They were for the 5 men she had carried out of the fire, the ones who lived. The 2 visiting men, legends in a world of shadows, saw the tattoo and immediately snapped to the most rigid, formal position of attention Cole had ever witnessed. They rendered a salute, not to a lieutenant, but to royalty of their savage tribe. The sound of their palms striking their brows was like a gunshot in the silent room. Captain Cole's face went from ruddy confidence to a pasty, sickly white. He didn't understand the symbol, but he understood the salute. Men like that did not salute logistics lieutenants. Colonel Maddox finally moved, stepping from the doorway into the center of the room, his presence sucking the remaining air out. His voice was dangerously quiet, each word a perfectly polished, lethal projectile aimed directly at Cole. Captain Cole. You are to stand at attention when a superior officer is saluted. Cole, bewildered, flinched but didn't move. I don't understand, sir. She's a lieutenant. I'm a captain. Maddox's eyes were chips of granite. You have just assaulted an officer of the United States Armed Forces. That alone will see you court-martialed. But that, Captain, is the very least of your catastrophic list of problems today. He paused, letting the weight of the moment crush Cole. You have just publicly disrespected and humiliated the sole survivor of Operation Nomad Fury. You poured beer on First Lieutenant Anya Thorne, United States Navy, on loan to us from Naval Special Warfare Development Group. A recipient of the Navy Cross for actions you couldn't comprehend in your worst nightmare. The name DevGru, whispered as SEAL Team 6, hung in the air, an impossible, earth-shattering revelation. Maddox turned his back on the captain, addressing Thorne directly, his voice now laced with a profound respect. Lieutenant Thorne. Your request for transfer to the Advanced Infantry Training Battalion at Camp Pendleton, to serve as lead instructor for the Urban Warfare course, is approved. Effective immediately. Pack your gear, then. He turned back to the ghost-white Captain Cole. You, Captain, will be taking her place. You are now the squadron logistics officer. And every morning at 0600, you will lead a mandatory seminar for all junior officers on this base. The topic, Maddox said, his voice dripping with ice, is, assuming competence. You will teach it until you, and everyone else here, finally understands it. Weeks later, the sun beat down on the dusty training grounds of Camp Pendleton. First Lieutenant Thorne stood before a platoon of young Marines, their faces eager and unlined by the horrors she knew. She wore a simple instructor's uniform, no medals, no ribbons. The faint scar on her jaw was a silver thread in the bright light. She didn't shout. Her voice was calm, measured, yet it commanded more attention than any drill instructor's roar. She was teaching them how to clear a room, but she was also teaching them something more. How to see. How to look at the person next to them and see the potential for greatness, not the assumptions of their own prejudice. Tucked under her sleeve was the tattoo. On her wrist was a simple metal bracelet, engraved with the name PFCJ Davis. She was keeping her promise. Not by seeking vengeance on a fool like Cole, but by forging better leaders, leaders who would never make his mistake. She was building a corps worthy of Davis's sacrifice. Her true victory wasn't in the mess hall, it was here, in the dust, shaping the future, ensuring the quiet warriors would always have a place, and would always be seen. If her story of quiet strength and profound purpose moves you, share it. Let's make sure the world never again overlooks the warriors who don't advertise their power. They are the ones who hold the line when no one is watching.